Thank you, Olivia. Hello, everyone. Marianne, do you have your hand raised? I see a little hand, and I think you do. Before I even begin, I want to make sure everyone's okay as they can be. You're fine. Okay. Okay. Great. So, hi, everyone. Thank you for holding space with us today. My name is Laura Quiros, as Olivia shared. My pronouns are she, her. I identify as an Afro-Latino who's also Jewish. I am calling in from Montclair, New Jersey, which is situated on the land of the Lenape. I am also able-bodied, and for those of you who may not be able to see me, I am wearing glasses and a light blue sweater, and my hair is pulled back in a ponytail. And I have hoop earrings on just to give you sort of a visual representation of what I look like. Um, I also have been doing these webinars with Olivia. This is our fourth one. And it's been really amazing to see the amount of people that are showing up just to hold space for an hour. Before we even begin, I just want to acknowledge the weekend that we had. Between the acts of anti-Semitism in Australia to the shooting at Brown University to random acts of violence across the country. It's been a very heavy week. So my prayers and thoughts are with all of you, and especially those of you who were indirectly or directly affected by any of these events that took place. It was a heavy week, right? And we continue to live in an environment that feels increasingly unsafe for all of us, and even more for those of us who have intersecting identities that are not of the dominant identity. And so I am very conscious of this whenever I hold space, that I'm just naming what may be coming up for people. It's also holiday time, which is one of the reasons why we decided to do this particular webinar around religion and spirituality from a trauma-informed lens. And so I know people are getting ready. It's already the third night of Hanukkah tonight. People are getting ready to settle down with their families and friends and take a break and celebrate Christmas and Three Kings Day and Kwanzaa and all of the things that people show up for, and just being together, right? I hope some of you will be able to take a break from work. I know some of you are also in, crisis work situations where you might not have the time to take a break. And so just making sure that everybody is taking care of each other during this time. And so with that, we have, about 50 minutes together, a little more than that. And I'm going to share a little bit about how I'm going to structure our time. So again, just being conscious that we're holding space in all of this complexity. I do have a PowerPoint, which I'm going to go over. But I do want participation. In our last webinar, it was around trauma-informed spaces of gratitude. And in all of my webinars, or whether it's a Zoom meeting or a workshop, I always leave room for self-reflective questions. And so those are on purpose. It's not just to fill time. It's for you to really think about those questions and how you're integrating the work into your everyday practice. I think one of the things that I really struggle with in webinars is that it's just me talking to a screen, right? And so I want to know that you are gaining something from our time together, and that even if it's a question or even if it's something you're thinking more deeply about, that you are bringing that into your practice, right? And so in order for that integration to happen, we need to sit in those times of self-reflective practice. And I try to do that as best as I can in a webinar format, which I think many of you know can be a little challenging. So as we start to kind of gather and settle into our time together, I'd love to hear from you in the chat why you chose this one. Right now, we have 233 participants in our forum, and we had many more that signed up. But I'm just curious, what brought you here? Why this one? Why today? And also just checking in, how are you feeling? Like, what's going on for you? If you want to say one word or two words about kind of how you're showing up. I always think it's important to just see how accessible people are when holding space, whether virtually or in person. So as I go through some of this beginning work with you, feel free to write in the chat. And if you do have a question, or if you want to stop me for any time, just raise your hand or write in the chat. Could we take a break? and Olivia will unmute you, and I'd love to hear your voice. So let me pull up my little PowerPoint here as we gather. So, I was thinking about what I wanted to bring to us today, and I felt it was important just to kind of define what we're doing here in these different lunch and learns. And so every topic that we are unpacking, every topic that we're looking at it through the lens of trauma-informed work. We're looking at it through a justice-oriented, trauma-informed framework. And today we're doing that with religion and spirituality. And so when I talk about trauma informed work, and again, this is a lens that has been really helpful for me. And I know many of you who have been in the trauma field and have worked in trauma, this may not be new to you, but I think what I always want to emphasize in our time together is that oftentimes trauma work is grounded in a white cisgendered male perspective, and trauma is looked at from a very micro lens. And so a lot of my work positively disrupts that traditional trauma space. And I look at trauma through the lens of socially engineered trauma, through the lens of systems of oppressions, through the lens of macro work, right? And I also look at it through the lens of identity. My work is identity centered. And what I mean by that, and this really ties into the work that we're going to do today, is that you are not separate from your identity. So the way that you view religion and spirituality, the way that you view your clients, right, is all from your identity. I say identity is epistemology, meaning your identity is your way that you know things, right? You know things through the way that you identify. And so I think sometimes we forget that because it's been my experience, especially lately, that, and I'm generalizing here, but that people tend to live in this like kind of dogmatic state of like, this is the right way or this is the only way. And so I want us to be more fluid and flexible and understand that we can only know things such as religion and spirituality from our own backgrounds. The trauma-informed work is systemically anchored, meaning I am always looking at the systems that impact the individual. I'm always looking at the systems that impact the people that I'm working with. It's relational. So we are in relationship. We are not separate from that. It's somatic, meaning it lives in the body, right? So even when we talk about religion and spirituality, how can you feel that in your body? I know we in my house, for this time of year, we celebrate Hanukkah and Christmas. And so I always have feelings like in my body when my daughters like the menorah, and also when Silent Night comes on, right? Like there's ways in which my body reacts in times of tragedy. And so really understanding that this work also is thematic. It's liberatory, right? So how are we infusing joy in our work? How are we infusing liberatory practice? And that it's also grounded in positive disruption and truth telling. And I feel like lately I've done a lot of positive disruption because I feel like, and again, this is an assumption, but particularly during times that are more complicated, like this time of year, people are always talking about this time of year. I feel like people tend to kind of retreat into their own ways of knowing, and I see a lot of bias that comes out. And so I'm just curious about that. I think the other way that I live through a trauma-informed, social justice-oriented approach is through curiosity, right? So my practice is a way of being, and that it honors liberation and joy and curiosity and the body in which we hold all of the work that we do. So I just want you to think for a minute about how you may infuse trauma informed justice work into your own ways of knowing and ways of being. And so let's dive a little deeper into how we can look at religion and spirituality from this trauma-informed, justice-oriented lens, as I just talked about, right? And so we know that there is complexity in this. There is complexity in religion, and there is complexity in spirituality, right? I think I'm going to use myself as examples because I think it's helpful just to put some narrative. And if there's examples that people in the audience want to share, please feel free to raise your hand or to write in the chat. But the complexity of being a Jewish person of color, right? That I think a lot of times when people think of Judaism, for example, there is sort of a white face that is connected to that. People definitely for the most part don't think about being Latina and Jewish at the same time. And so, my entry into my own religious practice or my own spirituality as it relates to Judaism was really complicated, right? Because I was not only navigating the practices, right, that I do hold, but I was also navigating how my own identity fits into that space, right? And so how are we doing that when we're looking at our clients and we're thinking about who they are we also honoring the complexity of what they're holding that may be very different from how we see the world? Um, I don't want us to assume meaning, right? I want us to listen to how clients define it. And there's complexity in this, in all of the identities, right? And we know that some religious practices actually admonish ways of being, admonish identities, right? The LGBTQ population, particularly in the space of Catholicism, right? And so, how do we kind of what I call positively disrupt these traditional ways of being through love by honoring the complexity of both identity and religious and spiritual practices? And so, my first question around complexity for you is how do you hold space for the reality that religion, right, and or spirituality can be a site of both trauma and both healing? So this is the other piece of it, that religion can be that site of healing, but it can also be that site of trauma for exclusion, right? For ways in which people have practiced religion that has not been inclusive or has been in the space of hate, to be frank, right? And so understanding that religion can hold both. I'm going to pause for a minute. If anyone wants to share anything, I'll pause for like a minute. And if nobody wants to share anything, then I'll keep on moving on. But I really want you to think about um, all of these kind of aspects of looking at religion and spirituality through a trauma-informed lens. Does anyone, Hannah, Haya, I'm mispronouncing your name. So when you speak, please say your name so I can hear it.
Hi there.
Hi,
Hi there. It's Chaya.
Haya, thank
Thank you
you.
so, so much for doing this today. I think it's so appropriate given the events that happen in the world, the massacre in Australia and the college and the horrible deaths in LA. It's just, and I think most importantly, um, they're not mentioning that it was religious.
Mm-hmm,
The reasons people were targeted. It's kind of being covered up.
mm-hmm,
Um, that's really, really frustrating.
mm-hmm,
And also thank you for giving me this space because as I wrote in the chat, I have not had a moment to sit with what happened.
mm-hmm,
And as you were talking about, religion and the diversity and how important it is to really bring it all together, it just was really, really meaningful for me to hear that. And I want to say about um, religion being trauma and a positive thing. So I'll just share my experience
mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm,
if you grew up a certain way with religious trauma, it's always possible to then start your own relationship, create your own relationship with a religion. Um, and so for me, it was, looking at God as uh, unconditional love. I'm sorry, conditional love, out to get me, blah, blah,
mm-hmm,
blah. And now, thank God, I'm in a place where I can see God as a loving father that loves me regardless of what I do. And, it's just a huge shift.
mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for stepping in. To two things I just want to name is that, religion and spirituality isn't really talked about much, which is so ironic because it's the basis for how so many people live, right? So, like, why are we having these conversations? And then the second piece is that just what you share kind of around the pain, but then the healing, right? And that's the liberation piece. Like if religion and spirituality has caused us harm, how do we liberate ourselves from that? And how do we change this experience right? While understanding what it was at that moment in time to that place of liberation and joy, right? And what can we find in what we have inherited that brings us liberation and joy rather than sitting in the pain and trauma of what we have experienced. So thank you for bringing that in today. Olivia, I think we had another hand. I
I
think,
just requested to unmute Leah.
okay, thanks, Leah.
It-
I just one of the things I think about when I think about like religious trauma and the complexity around it,
Mm-hmm,
and I know like it's like holiday season for a lot of people now, not everyone, but different people.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
is I think that sometimes people oversimplify it and they say like, okay, so just don't be religious or distance yourself from the religion that you grew up in. And
mm-hmm,
my experience has been that um, it brings people a lot of pain to just completely cut off from their religious origin, and
mm-hmm,
you don't come to complete healing by just leaving. So it's kind of like this nuanced space, and I think like looking at it from like a trauma informed lens is really important to be able to help people find like an in between space where they could maybe try to reclaim it or whatever it is, but it doesn't feel like the answer is simply saying like, okay, leave it, just walk away. And whatever religion it is, it seems like for people who have grown up deeply religious, like at times like it is important, too important for them to just um to just be able to heal by completely leaving it and not exploring or whatever they need to do around it. So I appreciate the nuance.
Yeah, Leah, I appreciate you and speaking up. I also just want to add to what you're saying, and that, I think like, basic kind of social work practice is curiosity. Like, I think, how do we not lean into advice, right? And say, oh, just forget about it and move on, instead of being like, what's that like for you? Right?
Right,
Like, that's
right.
what's that like for you? Could you tell me more about what that is for you? I think there's such a natural instinct to like give advice or to give a suggestions instead of being like curious. What, like, because I do think around this time, like, it begs for curiosity. And I think people kind of may sometimes retreat into dark places because there's no curiosity, right? Like, people are scared to ask, tell me what that feels for you, tell me what that's like for you, or tell me more about that.
Um,
And so, right? So how do we like help people unpack the potential trauma or pain or grief in terms of what people are feeling in this moment? So we're going to take
yeah,
one more. Yeah,
thank you.
sure. Thank you. We're going to take one more hand, and then we're going to move on to kind of our next slide and see what comes up in that space. So somebody had their hand raised. It just disappeared from my screen, but Olivia, I know you can see it. So,
Yep, I sent the request to unmute, but it looks like they just lowered their hand.
okay,
There we
great.
go. Oh, I'm sorry, they're unmuted now.
Yes,
Okay,
sorry.
that's okay.
Hi, Dr. Laura, Olivia, and everyone in the platform. Hello.
Hi.
My name is Chika Odele. I go by Chika. I just want to make a comment because I'm listening and I'm like, oh my God. I just had a co-worker talking about religion, and I said, hi, Merry Christmas to you. They go, I don't celebrate Christmas. So as we are talking, it kind of dawned to me. I said, wow. And you never ask why and what is his trauma. So I am commenting on this platform where we will learn this and maybe help people to adjust than just talking and walking by. So
Mhm.
thank you for this, and I'm hoping that this training will go far to most of people, that we can learn something new and how to help each other.
Mhm.
So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was interesting. Like, I went into the bank the other day and I was saying goodbye. I was like, okay, bye, thank you. And she said, Merry Christmas. And I was like, okay, that's so, like, that's sort of like, I also want us to be careful with with using dominant phrases, right? Like, I guess I celebrate Christmas because my husband does, and, you know, but I don't, right? Like, if it was just me, I probably wouldn't, because that's not what my religion celebrates. And so you know, and my husband and I joke about this all the time because he's like, oh, it's not a big deal. And I was like, no, it is a big deal because we're leaning into a dominant way of being. And if I engage him in sort of his other marginalized by society identities, right? Like as a Black man, for instance, you would push back against sort of the ways that whiteness show up that exclude you. And so I also, it sounds so silly, but like when we think about how we're greeting people or what we're saying to people, especially this time of year, being as inclusive as possible, even though we may be, even though there's this like push towards like dominant ways of being, right? Because um yeah, I just thought that just came to mind as you were talking. So I just wanted us to be, language is so important to me. And so just being mindful of that too. So as we move on,
Laura,
and
I'm
again,
so sorry. Before you move on, do you
yeah,
mind presenting in the slideshow mode so we can see the full slide?
yeah, sure. There
Thank
we
you
go.
so much.
Yeah. So, again, we only have an hour here, and just from the few comments, I feel like we could be here for half a day. I want to keep on going, but I also want to be mindful of reflective stories that we can share. So we'll see where we get at the hour. But so again, like I think we've talked about this a little, but considering we have talked about this, right? Identity and culture and race and gender and immigration and systemic influences, right? Context shapes spiritual meaning. And I think that's a really big one because depending on our own life experiences and depending on the context of how we were raised, how we were socialized, where we are now, the family that we do not choose or choose to be a part of, right? That lived experience shapes how we practice, shapes how we observe, shapes if we don't observe. And so how do you respond when a client's belief challenge your own worldviews and values? And I can bet that a lot of people on this call have had moments when they have been in a session, maybe it wasn't professional, but even in a personal place, where somebody's belief really challenged your worldviews. And kind of what do you do about that? I think obviously it's very different in a professional and personal space, but in a professional space, like what do you do with that? How do you hold that? How do you respond to that? And so Shauna is going to get us started with a answer from her, or at least a story.
Hi, my name is Shayna, and I'm a hospital chaplain.
Thank you
So,
for
oh, absolutely, thank you. These are questions that chaplains have a lot of training in, and we participate in interdisciplinary teams all the time uh, as we discuss how best to support our patients. And of course, I have my own spiritual orienting system, but when I am with a patient whose beliefs challenge my own values or worldview, I have to stay grounded in the curiosity that we were talking about before and the humility that we were talking about before. It really lends itself well to staying grounded in yourself and noticing those places and spaces where we might feel challenged, and to remind ourselves that of course we come and we bring things into the room with us, but some things are helpful and some things are not so helpful. So what is it about my experience that I can bring that will help me connect with this person and understand their perspective, especially in a caregiving or supportive dynamic where it's about what the patient or the client believes and not about us.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you do.
Yep.
Somebody also put in the chat generational trauma, which is also part of what shapes spiritual meaning as well. Maintain compassion, absolutely. And, really think about those moments, in my professional space, my brother, who has just a long history of struggling with addiction, is a big believer in GA, Gambling Anonymous, and reads the Bible and practices and has his sponsor. And he often says it's in God's hands, or phrases that he will cite from the Bible that have helped him with his recovery. And as his sister, I really struggle with that because I have my own beliefs about that, right? But this is something that has helped him heal, that is helping him heal. And so, when I am in that personal space with him, I bring in exactly what Shayna was talking about, the curiosity and the compassion and the humility, even though I have some real feelings about that, right? And how he is going about that. And so, I think that the ways in which I can operate as a humble clinician in my personal space has been really helpful for me. And so, I really want us to think about, as Shayna shared, where in our body we feel challenged when somebody comes in front of us when their beliefs deeply challenge our own values and worldviews, and how do we hold that space even if we vehemently disagree, right? In because we are serving, right? And what we say what we think doesn't have sort of a place in that moment. Anyone else want to share as it relates to centering lived experience and context? Jennifer, please. Thank you.
Thinking about challenges to responding to my clients' beliefs. And I worked for many years with someone who was a Jehovah's Witness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it became particularly difficult around um, roles as a woman
Mm-hmm.
within the family, and also just even in terms of like self-determination. Like there were some things that the religion, her religious beliefs, I felt I really struggled with, feeling like it was limiting her
Yeah,
self-determination, her
yeah,
autonomy. And so that's the place where it becomes difficult. Like I was absolutely fine with everything else, right? And holding a different worldview is fine. But when it intersects with like your actual place in society and your family and limiting, your healing and process, that's when it becomes challenging
yeah,
for me. Yeah. And then just on another small short note, talking with a group, I run an expressive arts group with teenage girls. And last week they were talking about, we were just openly talking about what are you celebrating for the holidays. And then we started talking about mental health and how it's viewed in Christianity. And then I offered, there are some parts of the world, like in West Africa, where the belief around mental illness is completely different. And
mm-hmm.
again, I struggled with like even holding how we hold this dominant Western view around mental health, mental illness. And that was a challenge for me, that they couldn't understand that you could have such a radically different view
Mm-hmm.
of mental illness. So yeah.
Yeah, I just wrote down on my book that I have next to me, Dominant Western View, because I think that's probably for all of us to hear again, right? Like, how are we imposing dominant Western views unintentionally? Because I believe everyone on this call, I don't know what you look like, I don't know who you are, but I'm all gracing you with good intention, right? And I think oftentimes the intention sometimes doesn't match the impact. And how often are we unintentionally pushing our dominant Western views on our clients without humility and curiosity because we think that is the way that's better, or we think that's the way that it should be, right? Or we think there needs healing when there might not be a space for that right now. So I appreciate you name that phrase because it's something for us all to think about. Sally, please go ahead.
Sally, if you don't mind raising your hand again, I can unmute you. Thank you.
And
Sally, oh yeah.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can.
now we can.
Okay. Yep. My name's Sally. I'm located in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a white queer woman, and I think something that I struggle with a lot is, I think coming from the same place, but reacting in different ways. I think when I'm working with somebody who is not from a dominant religion, or who comes from, you know, a minority that is oppressed, I think sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, I defer to you. Even
Mm,
if something, you know, I feel like it's very like kind of social worker that can like, or it reminds me of the mentality I had in social work school,
yeah,
sometimes, but like coming from a good place, but like potentially causing harm, like
yeah.
especially when like we're dealing with like generational trauma or
Mhm.
something else, but I put it in this like totally separate category that's like untouchable or something like that. um I don't know what the question is here, but I feel like I could use a little help.
Yeah, so I need to, like, if you could just unpack that a little more, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I mean, I work predominantly with like Afro-Caribbean people, and um I would say I work a lot with people who like end up getting abused, and religion is part of the motivator,
Hmm.
or you know, is used in conversation with like
Hmm.
physical abuse a lot of the time. And I think I've had patients where, you know, I've heard like this is um like God wouldn't approve this, and
Hmm.
are the ones hitting somebody, or the other way around.
Hmm.
And I think in those moments where like the trauma is happening in
Hmm.
the name of religion, I freeze up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to like handle religion in the same way that I might handle other topics, because it, you know, I think I treat it as too precious.
Yeah, that's so, yes. So thank you for that articulation.
Mhm.
And I think you're one naming a problem that it's because it's not talked about enough, right? Like Olivia and I were just saying before, in social work school, there's not really courses on religion and spiritual diversity. Like
No.
there's not, and there should be. And so that's a problem. And then I would almost bet if you move on to sort of your work experiences in the field, it is so precious. And I'm going to use that word because I think that's important. It's precious, but it can't be untouchable, right? Because if it's untouchable, then we're leaving out a significant part of people's lives, right? Like biopsychosocial spiritual religion, right? Like it should be all of those things. And so why, again, this is a question I asked 20 minutes ago, like why are we not talking about this? Why is it so precious that it can't be unpacked unless it's from somebody that has been, as somebody that has been ordained, right? And so um, I think going back to kind of your exploratory question, it's like the first word that came to mind when you were talking is curiosity. Like I, again, like be curious, right? Like I think sometimes when people talk about religion, it's like, oh no, I can't go there. And so yes, Connie, there's a fear. There's a fear of disruption. There's a fear that something bad will happen if you mention religion. But I think if we're not being curious about it, then we don't know. And again, we're leaving part of that life off. You know, when I was going to social work school, we had this thing called taboo topics, which I actually think is ridiculous because as a social worker, there should be nothing that's taboo like that. Like you're working with humanity. What's taboo, right? Whether it's sex, drugs, religion, like nothing should be taboo. And so I think there's a traditionality to social work practice or to the helping field where you're not supposed to talk about these things. Yet, if we don't honor them with curiosity and humility, and we won't be able to connect and we're missing out on part of the relationship. So I know I went off a little bit and there's lots of people responding in the chat, which I so appreciate. But I want everyone to be curious in the way that feels and is the most respectful, not curious from like, um, you know, like uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like not curious from a way that's damaging, but like actually curious, love curious, right? Like being curious from your heart. Um, so that's what I would say. I know we had one, Corey, you could be the last one for this, and then I'm gonna move on to our other slide. I hope that made sense. Yeah, you're welcome. Corey, did you want to say something? And yes, just to be clear, I'm not saying it's okay to abuse. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm talking about not exploring the religiosity of a client's life, right? So that's really what I'm talking about, just to be clear. So okay, so let's, Corey, are you good or do you want
Can
to
you hear
talk?
me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute
No,
myself.
that's okay.
You actually said what I was going to say, and that I think it's important that we make sure that curiosity does not simply equate to asking questions. Because
Right.
as a
Yes.
person of faith, someone who is very strong in my faith, or, you know, as far as like how deep rooted I am in it, I don't mind having the questions come, but I also don't want you asking those questions with a motivation of trying to disprove what I believe. And so I think that's important for people to recognize, and the same for our clients. Like, we have to be very conscious of, why are we asking these questions? And you said it very well. Like, are we asking it truly from a place of wanting to know more and actually get to the heart of what's happening with our patients, or are we trying to really reinforce our own beliefs that we don't, you know, which we don't agree with as far as our patients are concerned?
Totally. Or being like disrespectfully curious. I mean, I know, trust me, like as somebody that has an ambiguous identity, I know who's asking, like who really wants to know stuff about me and who's just like, you're different. Who are you? You know what I mean? So I also think it's like, yeah, absolutely. How are we asking the questions? What's our motivation? And I always balance curiosity with use of self. So if I'm asking questions to somebody, I'm going to be prepared to also share a small part of myself, so it doesn't, so there's balance, there's reciprocity. And that's also the piece of trauma informed work, that I need to be reciprocal in this relationship. I'm not going to share my beliefs and worldviews, right? Because that's not going to move the work forward. But I am going to share parts of myself to balance out the conversation, right? And so, you know, you also don't get a lot of how to ask questions from the heart space. That's actually probably a good training. But I think that's really important, right? Honoring curiosity from the heart space and balancing that out with some use of self. So oh, Derek, did you have a burning comment or should we move on? I don't want to minimize anyone's feelings or responses right now.
To add that I think that religion, for the most religions are designed to be a benevolence to people in general. So when it comes up with my clients, even if we're not of the same religion, I look to help the client figure out how the religion is either embellishing their lives, or somehow they're misinterpreting something and it's some sort of a detriment to them. And then we explore that, you know, not passing judgment. What are they getting from their scriptures? What are they getting? And sometimes read the passage to me. Let's go through it together so we understand. Maybe you are misinterpreting this and it's causing you harm, or causing you to think harm, or causing you to act out in a certain way. Let's read the scripture together. Let's put it in some context. And again, I don't need to be of the same religion for us to read together and see what we both come up with, is how we try to approach it here.
Totally. And also, like, does the scripture align with your values? Because I
Exactly.
think, one, I love reading scripture, so like amazing. And two, like, does it align with your values? And if it doesn't, then like, what's the purpose, right? So like, I love that. I love that. Okay, let's move on. Shayna, I see you, but I just want to move on. And then we'll come back to. So again, and oh, wow, look, we did this already. We're way ahead of the game. So cultural humility over competence. There's no such thing as cultural competence. You can't be competent at culture. You can't be competent at religion. You can't be competent at spirituality. These are ongoing aspects of people's lives that are exploratory and that are situated on a journey that ebbs and flows. We heard from Hannah in the beginning that, you know, once upon a time, religion and spirituality could have caused harm and now it's healing, right? So like there's a flow to this. And I think sometimes that trips up social workers and other helping professions because we feel like we have to be experts in this. We have to be experts in clients' lives. And we're not. We are I call us restorers of the soul. I call us people on a journey with humanity, right? We are on this journey. We are not trying to be competent. We are trying to be curious. We are trying to be open. We are trying to be exploratory. We're trying to read scripture in the metaphoric way that Derek just shared and ask questions and find purpose and align with values, right? Like that's what we're trying to do. And so I want us to be really conscious about how sometimes we move into a fixer role or to a, let me give you advice role, which may come when we are rushed or when things are moving too fast, rather than somebody who is helping somebody else on a journey through humility, through love, through disruption, through curiosity and exploration. Any thoughts about that or anything that we've gone over so far before I move on? Shayna.
Yes, I'm sorry to speak again. I just wanted to raise a little bit of a red flag with reading scripture because if you don't have specific training around scripture, around exegesis and theology, especially it's a place where you can very easily get into murky waters and perpetuate spiritual harm, especially if you are imposing your own understanding of what scripture has to say. So I just wanted to put a little red flag to say yes, that's a beautiful idea, but please be careful. Chaplains ourselves have lots and lots of training in higher education to have those kinds of conversations. And someone brought up Spanish culture. Yeah, there's lots of reasons to be careful around that.
Yeah, I'd love if we could just call it like raise our awareness around this and just be intentional rather than red flag, just because I would just want to honor in the space, right? So like I love that you brought that in, and instead of a red flag, maybe it's like, increased awareness or just understanding how it could move in a different direction if there is an awareness or training around it, if that's okay. Okay, who else? Great. Who else wants to speak? I know there were a few hands. Olivia, I'll let you control that because I can't see once it disappears.
Am I unmuted? Oh,
Yes, you are.
oh, okay. I just wanted
Oh,
to.
what's your name?
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. My name is Talia Miles.
Okay.
Um, I, and I've been providing. I'm unlicensed. Currently going back to school. But I've been providing I guess you would say field trained counselor for the past few years, crisis services mostly, and family services. And so what I wanted to say was I've had I've been in spaces where I've allowed, or rather, I've provided a safe space for clients and families, etc., to pray and to sit in that moment. And so, even though it didn't align sometimes with my beliefs, it was important to the client and the family to have that integration in a space where they felt safe. And so, I didn't. It wasn't, like my intention, nor did I overstep by like, giving my opinion for sure. But I do think it is important as providers that we do facilitate a safe space for clients to bring in those different elements of their beliefs, whether that is faith, sexuality, et cetera, right? Whatever would categorize them as vulnerable people or different than the norm, so to speak. And so I just wanted to say that it isn't, um, although it isn't discussed very widely, I do think that it is something that we should be doing, because according to, the code of ethics,
Yeah.
it says that, client welfare is standard, right? That's what we should be focusing on. And so if the client themselves wants to include these different areas, then in order to actually help them, I do think that we should be open to the idea that they have, that they can, um, practice these things in the in their role as a client, and we can help them
Mhm.
facilitate, accordingly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I also just want to, we know that the first stage of trauma work is safety, but I also think sometimes in social work practice that word gets minimized. Like it takes time to build a safe space, right? And I think it takes extra long time to build a safe space when you're talking about religion or spirituality or some of these other taboo topics, right? And so one of the things that I want to encourage is making sure that that safe space has been built over time, that we're not just naming it, but actually we're building it. And also the other piece of this is supervision, right? Like around, particularly around topics that I might not feel comfortable in, or I might need more help in, I seek out supervision immediately, right? I always seek out supervision because I like to process out loud a lot, and I know I can only see the world through my worldview. So I just want to encourage us also. And, to Shayna's point, like I also think it would be cool for social workers and helping professions to align themselves with clergy, for example, right? Like, and seek advice and understand more about that space. There's so much synergy and we never get to really work together, which I think is really unfortunate. We're all in the humanity work, right? And so, yeah, so Talia, thank you so much for bringing that in. And I am grateful for the work that you do with your clients too. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. So I just want to kind of go through some of the other things we have here, and then I will stop in a minute and answer some questions, or maybe not even answer questions, but hear stories. So again, we always have to be mindful of attending to power and historical trauma. We've talked about this today. People have put this in the chat, naming systemic harm, the harm of colonization, exclusion, racism, gender-based oppression, right? Like avoiding individual structure trauma. I think so much of this is important because I think when we live in our agencies, we tend to lean into micro practice and we forget about the ways in which historical trauma, as we know now, is alive and well, right? And so how are we also understanding, especially clients that are immigrants or have come to this country by other means, right? Like there's trauma in that journey, there's trauma in living here. And understanding how those macro systems of oppression and that socially engineered trauma has also shaped the way that people practice and understand their religion and spirituality. And the last thing we want to do is contribute to that, right? And so again, this is important. And it's important for us to keep in mind as we go through our work. And so again, we talked about this, creating brave spaces. So I'm a big believer in brave spaces. If I was to ask you how many truly brave spaces you have in your life, I wonder how many you would say, right? Like I was talking about this to my friend earlier today, that I feel like I've had to be brave in so many spaces that don't honor my bravery, right? Like either people are defensive when I bring something up, or they, quickly try to agree or disagree when I wasn't even creating a space to agree or disagree. So how are we truly like validating tension and pain and understanding how we're modeling relational engagement in order to create brave spaces? Brave spaces are spaces where people can speak, right? Like brave spaces are spaces where people feel like they can say things and name things that other people won't say or name. And I think sometimes, going back to this phrase of dominant Western views, that shuts people down, right? Like that has to be, oftentimes it's like that has to be the way, when there are all these other ways of being. And so how to create these brave spaces of dialogue, right? And humility and curiosity, so people can show up and be brave to share how they practice, to share their religion, to share their spirituality with you. So I'd love for all of you to just think about on your own how you're not only creating safe spaces, but also these brave spaces as well. Supporting agency and meaning making, right? So, if I ask you the question, in what spaces do you feel really seen? Like who sees you, like really sees you? I wonder how many people you would have on your list. And when that client is sitting in front of you, are you seeing them? Like, are you really seeing them? Or are you just seeing the diagnosis? Or are you just seeing what's on the progress note? Or are you just seeing how they're showing up in your office? Like, how are you seeing them? And so I want us to really think about, self-directed healing. And I want us to think about how we support our clients and how we see them, right? How we really see them and what meaning are we making out of our relationship that we have with them. And then again, reflecting on your own location, what is your beliefs and biases and discomfort, right? Where is that complicated for you? Whose meaning matters most here? Mine, theirs. And so a huge part of trauma-informed, social justice-oriented practice is about your self-reflection, right? Understanding, not saying, oh, I don't have biases, or not saying, oh, I'm going to get rid of those biases, but really understanding where they're coming from and what disrupts your work, right? And what is disingenuous that it feels uncomfortable to name. And then, these are just self-reflective questions. How has my own religious, spiritual, or non-religious background shaped the way I understand faith, power, and meaning? What early messages did I receive about religion or spirituality, and how might those messages influence my reactions to clients? When do I feel most comfortable or uncomfortable in conversations about faith, and why? And so you will get this PowerPoint, and I encourage you all to answer these questions. But I'm going to pause for our last 5 minutes together, and I'd love to hear. I know some people had some hands up, so where are those hands? What are you thinking? Let's spend the last few minutes together in dialogue. Also, before we open up the mics, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Like,
Hi.
just 1 second. Let me just say one thing.
Mhm.
Stay on mute. But we just held space for over 200 people on religion and spirituality, which isn't easy. And I'm wondering, right, the clinician in me is wondering how everybody is sitting there. Like, I don't want you to be in a place of agree or disagree. I want you to be in a place of self-reflection, right? I want you to think about what came up for you today, where your work is, what you need to lean more into, not just validating what you already do, but where are your points of growth, right? And so again, it's more about that self-reflective practice and not what you agreed or disagreed with today, but where you are. So I'm just putting that out there. Okay, go ahead. Who
Hi.
opened up?
My name's Denise. The first thing I want to say, I apologize. I only came in on the second half, but I came in right on the second half. And what I wanted to say is that I took a world religion course in college, and I remember I went to Maria College and I took it by a Catholic nun. And the most thing that I was impressed is she was as enthusiastic about talking about other religions versus just the Catholic religion. So after the course was over, I had a meeting with her to ask her how she does, and she explained this, and it always stuck with me. In America, we call ourselves religious a lot, and we use that term as our binders, but religious, when you're saying you're religious, you're saying you are following the laws of your religion. When you're saying you're spiritual, which most Americans are, is because we don't follow those rules. And so we take it upon ourselves here in America that other people and other cultures that follow and are very religious and follow their laws of their religion as being too strict or too out of contact or um too some of their religion may be too off guard, may catch us off guard. But I think when you really need to think about what religion means and what religious means versus what spiritual means in the context of when you're talking to individuals, especially when it comes to culture, especially when it comes to people from other um, immigrants over in America. You need to understand how their religion
Mhm.
is versus what we think here as America as religion. And
Yeah,
that always stuck with me.
yeah. Thank you for that, Denise. And I think that just leans into our talk about being curious and being humble. So thank you for bringing that in. Who else?
Hi again, it's Chaya. There is so much to cover. I feel like we need another full meeting. So someone mentioned um, that sometimes you have to be careful not to interact with clients when it comes to religion because it can be, they can be schizophrenic or they can be, and it's an interesting point that religion does intersect a lot when you have the OCD piece and you have the schizophrenia piece, so many parts that can sometimes come up with religion.
Yeah, yeah, so many. Yeah, I feel like we need a part two. I mean, there's other things that I've thought about during our time together that we don't have time for, but yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other thoughts or questions? This is not, I'm not wrapping up this talk in a nice bow. I'm comfortable with unfinished conversations. So I just want to name that too. Abby, go ahead.
Abby, you were unmuted if you had, I saw your hand was up. Abby, you are unmuted if you would like to speak.
Yes, sorry. It was a glitch on my computer.
Okay.
So after this training, will we get like a certificate that we attended this training?
No.
No, this is not offering continuing education credits for this training. We will offer in future trainings.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Diane, you put in the chat, can you speak to the why spirituality, but I'm not sure I understand what you mean. I don't know if you wanted to unmute and ask.
I can mute myself so that Diane can speak.
Oh, Talia, hi.
Sorry, yeah, I saw the unmute on my
Go
screen.
ahead. You can go ahead.
I was just going to say that I was definitely interested in a second conversation, like a more open dialogue conversation where um maybe licensed providers and unlicensed providers who are in the field can maybe discuss how we um provide trauma-informed care, how we, what approaches we take as well, because I do think that a lot of the conversations and a lot of the comments, because I'm reading those too, I don't know who or who isn't licensed or where we are in our careers, but I do think we tend to have a different perspective based on where we are in our careers. And so I do think it would be helpful to sort of cross paths and just open the floor for those discussions.
Yeah,
Just gonna
totally. I appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone else? I know it's 1 o'clock, so if you have to run, go ahead. I'll stay here for another couple of minutes in case anyone else wants to ask questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Diane.
Hi, how are you? Yeah, my question, I guess, everybody, our clients, ourselves, come to the thought of spirituality or religion for many different reasons, for contentment or to, be consoled. And there, we all seem to have a need for that. Even if we are atheistic, we have to kind of tell ourselves something related to why we're here and why things happen to us and what we do in relation to the world around us. And we get guidance, I guess, from spirituality.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so many different reasons why people are, gravitate towards it or don't.
Yeah. And I think we have to ask that, right? And I think it changes depending on life circumstances, right? I know for me it has, depending on, who passed in my life, who hasn't, thinking about what I've inherited, what I want to do with it, my ancestors, all of it. The older I get, my belief in the universe. So I just want to leave everybody today with curiosity and joy and liberation and whatever this time of year means to you. I hope that you find peace in it, and I hope you take some time for yourself to sit in those moments of reflections. I hope that you laugh. I hope that you dance. I hope that you get big hugs from whoever you need them from. And we will see you again in a month. We're going to be doing some stuff on mental health. And just thank you all. Seriously, thank you. It's a very respectful audience on this topic, and I thank everybody who showed up today. So thank you, and thanks Olivia for setting us up. Take care, everyone.